Boom. And, I got to tell you, it is a fucking shitty day today. I started the day, and it seemed like it was going to be okay. And then, of course, it's always right before 5 o'clock is when it starts pouring rain. And that's what I have to drive home in. But anyway, this is the Drink O'Clock podcast. I'm the host, Rob Maxi BV Valencius. And I have with me Brittany Dixon. Welcome to the podcast.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. Super excited.
Yeah, so I always say this, but I feel like every person I interview has much more of an interesting world than I do. But so you're the host of the Productivity Pod, cast in parentheses.
Yep.
And I listened to a couple of your episodes. I work in business, so it was pretty impactful. Some of the stuff you were talking about, some of the people you were interviewing. And so you're kind of like your bio, you're a minimalist business operations strategist.
Yeah.
And so you help small business owners implement simple systems for their businesses so they can not work 100 hours a week.
Yes.
Right?
Yep, that's the gist of it. I see too many entrepreneurs quit full-time jobs and then work more than a full-time job because they don't have systems in place. So that's what I'm here to help with.
Which kind of defeats the purpose of being an entrepreneur and working for yourself, right?
Absolutely.
So let's cheers. I don't know if you're drinking.
I am.
Awesome. What you got in that glass over there?
I have some Shanky's Whip Irish whiskey. It's like a flavored whiskey. It's really good.
Ooh, okay. What's it flavored? That's interesting.
It's like a vanilla caramel. So it's kind of sweet, but it mixes with like literally everything.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That sounds delicious. I might have to try that. But so I guess we'll start this off. Introduce yourself a little bit. Let's talk a little bit. And I will say this, right? And let's hit the elephant in the room right now. You're a female, right? So one of my business owners is a female, and we talk. She goes way back to the 70s and 80s, and she tells all the crazy stories. And we work in insurance, so you can imagine being a female working in the insurance in the 80s, where you if you didn't wear a skirt, it was weird, right? So talk a little bit about like how you got into business, and we'll kind of start there.
Yeah. All right. That's so much in one little thing here.
Who is Brittany Dixon? We want to know.
I'll give you as much as I can in a little snapshot. So I've actually been a business owner for about 7 years, but it has taken a very crazy journey throughout all of that. And I actually became an accidental entrepreneur. Like this, I didn't think was ever in my cards. I grew up super poor and had no entrepreneurship in my family, nothing. And I got into the wedding and event planning space kind of right out of hospitality, all the serving, all that fun stuff. But then I got into weddings and events, and I worked for a corporate restaurant doing that. I've got twin daughters that are 10 now, but I had the twins at that time, and I was working insane hours.
Been there.
Yep, been there, done that, right? So really, I kind of was going to stay there. It's one of those jobs that's really easy. It was stressful because it was in event planning, but in July of 2016, they actually decided to let me go. So I had an inkling. I had started my LLC about 6 months before that as like a side hustle. I don't know when I was going to find time for a side hustle, but I actually organized people's houses. So when I first started, I was like the whole home edit and Marie Kondo. I would go into moms' houses and help them organize their house. So I had that as a fallback plan when I got fired, and I was like, well, I guess we're gonna jump in and be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
So yeah, then I had to hire a business coach because I had no idea what I was doing running a business, and she really was like, that instead of doing this for people's houses, you could go and do it for their business, right? And I was like, wait, what? So yeah, I kind of went into this business space, and it all kind of comes full circle because I was that organized, crazy person in high school with binders and Post-it notes. So it's just in my nature. But now I'm able to do that for business owners and really help them streamline their business operations so they can not work 17 hours a day.
That's cool. That's cool. Yeah, my fiance, she's very well. She's one of the super organized people.
Yep.
And I make fun of her because she still buys notebooks.
Yeah.
And like that's how she stays organized. She like writes in her notebook every day, and then that's also she does she kind of like trains all the salespeople in her region for her franchisee. Okay. So she also like does a lot of shit, and so I always make fun of her because she has these little fucking mechanical pencils. It's all yours. And I'm like, can you just type it? Can you just please type it?
Either that, or I've actually got an iPad with my Good Notes app, so I take digital notes, which is like game changer.
I did that when I went back to college. I have a Surface, and I use OneNote.
Yep.
And it was amazing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I can't live without my Good Notes.
So let's start with your podcast. So, you got into this business venture kind of organically, right?
Yep.
Why did you start the podcast? Like, what kind of, got you into it, and how has that kind of helped you in your business ventures and kind of what you're doing?
For sure. So about the whole first year of that, when I got into the business space, I had no idea what I was doing, and I was flinging things and trying new things, and it took me about a year to kind of get through that like testing phase where I still was in hustle mode. But then I really just started seeing a lot of patterns and people asking the same types of questions, and then kind of paired that with my expertise and was like, okay, like this is where I'm going. This is the direction. And I think when that happened, I was still taking on tons of people at really low prices. So I was still working crazy hours. And there was this realization at some point that I was like, if this is going to be scalable for me, and I'm actually going to be able to work without working 24/7, I have to find a way to like answer all of these questions for everybody that can't pay me enough money. So that's kind of what happened is I was in that hustle mode of like, I would take on anything and everything from free dollars to very little dollars for the amount of work put in. And I was answering a lot of the same things, and I saw a lot of patterns. So that kind of got me in the direction of like, hey, I could create a podcast for those people that aren't able to pay me just yet to help them, and then go find people that can actually pay me. So that was kind of that transition period is when I was like, okay, I cannot work like this all the time. Like I cannot work 17 hours a day anymore. I think that's kind of when I was like, there's got to be a different way. So, and then obviously podcasts take time to kind of launch and all the good stuff. So went through that whole learning process, but it really has
total learning process.
Oh, it's a massive learning process.
I had asked you about the how can you be a productive entrepreneur while keeping the healthy like work-life balance. Yes.
Okay, so obviously all of us have started businesses for freedom. I think that's kind of everybody's end goal, right? It's help people make a lot of money and work less hours.
Don't fucking work for the man,
Yes, that's the end goal. But I think when we get into entrepreneurship, it can be really easy to slip into, just one more email, just one more thing, just one more. And you'll just one more yourself to working 17 hours a day every day. So I think the first thing, kind of high level, how to be productive but still have that balance is you've got to know what you're working towards goal-wise, and it has to be very like concrete. You can't just have kind of willy-nilly goals all over the place. You've got to say like, this is what I'm trying to accomplish this year. Because it's like your roadmap, right? You are consistently working towards those things on a daily basis if you've got this kind of compass to follow. I also think that goals mean nothing without habits. So you really have to start putting some habits in place to make sure you're actually getting these things done. So if you've got something on your goal list, like launch a podcast, and you have a date in mind, on a regular basis throughout the week, you need to have time dedicated on your calendar for those types of tasks, because if you don't have them concretely planned out, it's going to be really easy to just keep kicking that can down the road and being like, oh, well, I'm not there yet, so we're just going to push it down. And then a year later, you've got the same goals.
I can be a steady can kicker myself. I'm not gonna lie
we all can. It can be very easy, especially when we kind of just get in the day-to-day flow of stuff and we're like, oh, we'll just do the same thing. It's fine. And kind of get into a routine and habit that maybe is not serving those goals. It's really easy to do. But I think when you have those big goals in place and you know them and you're consistently reviewing them, and then you're actually putting time on your calendar to accomplish those things, that's when you can start to have this work-life balance, right? Because you can then say yes and no to things because you're like, oh, this is my goal. That doesn't fit. I can say no to that. Or even just mapping out an ideal week. I think so many people don't actually know what a perfect week would look like for them. And again, if you don't know what you're working towards, it's really hard to like make those steps to get there. I actually have this whole like days by design framework where I make sure people put personal things in their calendar first, like lunch. It sounds silly, but so many entrepreneurs do not put time for lunch and then get stuck in back-to-back meetings, and then they don't eat lunch and they're not taking care of themselves. Time off, vacation, all of that. You've got to put that stuff in before business, because if you want that balance and you don't put that in there, you're just going to barrel over it with business stuff and get stuck in the hustle.
Yeah, and the goals are important too, because you have to set them so that they're attainable, right? You can't just be like, I'm going to be my business is going to make 10 million next year, and with no clear defined step on how to even fucking get there, because if you did, you'd be a 10 millionaire 3 years ago.
Right. Yeah, no, they definitely have to be attainable. They've got to be realistic and based on some data, right? Like you said, you can't go from 0 to 10. I mean, maybe, but it's going to be a really weird case scenario of like 0 to 10 million. So I think you've got to set those attainable goals, but if you don't have habits built in to actually do these things, right? Like it's the same thing as going to the gym. You're like, I want to lose 15 pounds. Well, if you're not putting on your calendar and going to the gym every single week, you're not going to get there. It's the same with business goals, same with anything from a productivity standpoint. You've always got to have that kind of end destination in mind.
How do you feel about, I see a lot of stuff, especially now with how social media is, but how do you feel about like affirmations and journaling with business?
Yeah, I love affirmations, journaling, mindset stuff. I think, honestly, mastering your mindset is one of your biggest business assets, because you can learn all the strategies and funnels and tech that you want. If you're in a crappy mindset all the time, you're not going to be happy with your business. You're going to attract negativity. Like, I believe in that all 100%, but to a point that you can't just like fluffy woo-woo mindset everything. You have to go take action and get shit done.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of like, oh, well, if you say this, and you write it, it's going to happen. And it's like, no, that's not how the world works.
Right. I believe that it can get you in the mindset to be prepared to take the action to make it happen. But just writing, I want to be a millionaire, you're not really going to, it's not going to happen.
So let me ask you a little bit of a controversial question. So
okay.
I just turned 37. All right. Okay. So I'm a millennial, which is total bullshit. I'm not actually a millennial.
Right.
But I guess
I'm
according
33
to the years.
And I am also, and I'm like, no, thank you. Don't put me in that category.
No. But with today's world of everybody wins, everyone gets a trophy, how do you think that's going to have an impact on future entrepreneurs? Now, obviously, I know entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Like, I own my own business, right? I don't. That's not my main thing right now, but I have many little things, and I've tried and I've failed a million different things I've tried. Yep. But entrepreneur is kind of like in your soul. I feel like if you want to be a business owner, it's like part of who you are. But how do you feel like this generation is going to handle rejection and fail? I mean, I've seen it in my own job where we hire these young kids and they're gone in a month because like, oh, I have to do work,
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that the online space has made that a little bit more difficult because it is easier to make way more money than traditionally we're used to, right? Like traditionally, 60, 70 with inflation, it keeps going up, right? But like that's the norm. You go work 9 to 5, you take the weekends off, you get 2 weeks of vacation a year, and that's what you do. And now I think so many young people are seeing what the internet can do for you, and that you can do affiliate marketing and you can sell other people's products and make ridiculous money working way less. And it's got to be this fine balance, because like you said, this like rejection piece, like, oh, well, I don't want to work, I don't want to do this, like that, it's a hard mentality to have for sure. But I also think the internet space is making that harder, because you can make crazy money working way less hours.
Yeah. Have you yourself had to step into like a young entrepreneur's space and kind of guide them in the right direction yet, or?
Yeah, I mean, I've worked with a couple of younger entrepreneurs. Again, it's kind of that mindset thing. You've got to be in that space to be ready to want to be helped, to actually receive some of that advice. So I think there's a lot of like, I can just figure it out myself mentality going on. Most of the business owners I work with are kind of like my age and older. Some of them are older too, just because like tech is changing and communication, like it's really hard for them to keep up with that stuff from a systems and operations standpoint. So I kind of have a mix. My clientele is kind of all over the board.
I mean, and that's good, right? I mean, I feel like if you had a bunch of young kids, you'd probably kill yourself. And if you had a bunch of old people, you'd be bored as shit.
Yeah, I think with the younger ones, I would mentor, but not necessarily do like the consulting implementation stuff that I do, versus like more established businesses. I'm like, just pay me a lot of money and I'll come in and do it for you.
And so I work in Medicare. So a lot of the older agents I deal with that have been doing it for 15, 20 years or whatever, they struggle a lot with technology. Is that something you've seen a lot with a lot of your clientele?
For sure.
On the older side.
Yeah, and I think too, just the sheer volume of tools that people have to use right now. That's why I like have deemed myself the minimalist business coach and strategist, because I'm like, I want you to have the least amount of tools and apps and software and the least amount of things to try and manage, because I think nowadays it's like, oh yeah, we've got email and texts and phone calls and social media, and I'm going to send you a Slack message and I'm going to put it in a project tool and I'm going to put it here. Like, nobody's going to get anything done with stuff in 14 different places. So I think the older people would be able to kind of adapt to it better if there wasn't like the sheer volume of things that they're having to keep track of, as far as like places to log in, and I mean, heck, even just like username and passwords, right? Like,
I mean, look, if Google Chrome didn't save mine, I'd be fucked.
Right.
I would be so screwed. But also, I'm like a hacker's like wet dream, like they're like waiting for me to like slip up.
Password for like 47 different things. Oh yeah.
If I log in here, look, hold on, let me look at this. If I log into my password manager on Chrome, let me see here.
And I have a similar thing. I have LastPass, and I've got hundreds upon hundreds of passwords, and yeah.
I have 1,076 passwords saved. Can you guess how many are compromised?
Probably at least 1,000.
227, which is still...
All right.
That's over 20%. But if you look at it, I bet you out of the 1,000, the 227 are all basically the other 1,000 that I have.
Right.
That's the scary thing. So like, I'm looking at this, I'm like, all right, I've been using the same password since fucking high school. So I was 13 or 14, so 24 years. And so a hacker in Russia is just like
extra exclamation point and @ sign every now and then when they need different characters. Oh yeah,
I just had to reset. With insurance, I sell for multitude of carriers. So I probably have like 10 or 15 carriers I work with, and so I had to change my password for the Affordable Care Act, which is just totally different, and it wanted a minimum of 15 characters.
What?
So I had to take my normal password, add 2 periods, and then I doubled my normal password. So it's like my password, 2 periods, and then the same thing. And I'm like,
That's
look,
too
I'm
many
going to forget.
characters.
I'm going to go to log in next year, and it's going to be like, no, go fuck yourself. And I'm like, I have no idea what my password is. You know?
So there's a stat that says people spend 12 and a half hours a week searching for information, whether that be passwords, usernames, emails, Zoom links, text messages, like all these things. People are spending 12 and a half hours of their week searching for information because there's no organized system and structure for a lot of this stuff.
I'd probably spend more.
Right? And that's the average. So there are going to be people that spend more. But you think about that, like from an entrepreneur standpoint, 12 and a half hours. Do you know how much stuff we can get done in 12 and a half hours if we don't have to search for links and passwords?
Well, it's not sleep, right? Because do entrepreneurs really sleep? What's Elon Musk say? 5 hours is...
So that goes back to the work-life balance thing, right? Like I get my full 8 hours. I need 8 hours and I get it. And I still get stuff done because I've got systems in place to help me be way more efficient during my work time.
You know, I worked retail for a long time, which I've said on my podcast before. I think that it should be mandatory for every human to work retail.
Retail and hospitality, both of them.
Exactly. I think every human, like it should be like when you go to get your driver's license or your permit, you need like 6 months of working retail or in the hospitality space, because I feel like life skills from that, you learn the good and the bad from humanity.
Yes.
I worked retail for 12 years. I worked my way up. I was an area manager. I had hundreds of people that that reported to me, and I was working 75 hours a week before I decided, all right, I'm done. I need, like, the problem with retail, I will tell you this, and hospitality, is once you get in it, it's hard to fucking claw your way out of it.
It is.
Because that's your skill set, right? So it was really hard for me to find a job that wasn't connected, regardless of my sales experience and P&L and my ability to do things. Like, I couldn't get, like, it took me forever to be able to get out of it. And it was a friend that got me into where I am now, and I've been there for almost 9 years. But it's wild, and I say this to everybody. And maybe you could chime in. Like, what's your thoughts on that? If I became president and I made that a rule.
Yeah, and I think that's, I don't know. Okay, so I don't know if that's our mentality being like the older millennials, right? Or like I grew up really, really poor and went into that space, and I felt like you had to kind of like work your way up kind of thing. Same. But also, like, you're right. You learn so much about humanity, the good, the bad, the ugly, like all of it, just in those two spaces. And then you learn to be a better tipper because you realize how hard that job actually is. Because I think people that haven't been in hospitality, they're like, oh, 20%'s fine. I'm like, yeah, but maybe 25. Like, they do a lot of work. I tip my barber. She's a maestro with my beard, which I'm starting to get I'm a little rough right now, but I tip her 30%. Whatever the highest percentage on, I'm lazy, but whatever is the highest on the screen, that's what she gets. And like, I'm going bald. I've been going bald for years. So my head it takes her 10 minutes, not even, it's the beard that she puts work into. So I'm like, no matter what, she's getting a 30 or 35% tip, because and I don't know,
she
like
deserves.
I said, I don't know if that's a mentality of like growing up poor and seeing that and like going through that, or like the older, I don't know where it comes from, but I do think everyone should have to work retail or hospitality. You know what, you see the way people look down on you, but also you see the good. Like, I mean, I helped a lot of people. I was an area manager for GameStop, so I worked my way up. I was a holiday associate in 2003, and it took me I think it was around 2015 is when I stopped, and that's when I was an area manager. But I was at the bottom of the bottom. Like, you couldn't get much more bottom than I was, and I worked my way up to a point where I was managing multiple locations, and
it's a cool experience, and like regardless of what you do as a person, I do think like you getting that promotion and seeing what that's like, and then having people report to you or having people that you manage, and then also handling objections and handling when you work at a GameStop, you deal with a lot of young kids, so it's how do I handle if I'm 25, how do I handle a 17-year-old, right? And their mindset, how do I manage them to be more productive? And I just think you learn a lot, as a manager too.
Definitely. And it was funny when I kind of got into the event planning space and through restaurants and then worked in the business organization space, like I saw a lot of common threads. So like, obviously I'm here to help increase efficiency and like make better processes for business owners. And when I'm thinking back through this, like I was always the person in hospitality at all my serving jobs where I'm like, the plates make more sense over here because this is what we do with the plates. Like I've always been that like efficiency minded type of person, but I think being able to see that in different kind of venues or like places that you're working, you start to put all these things together and it leads you on a path of like, this is what you're supposed to do kind of thing. So yes, everyone should work hospitality or retail. Take your pick. You can do one or the other because there's pros and cons to both.
I'd say more cons than anything, but I do think that just, it teaches you values,
it does.
My first job, my first job was I worked at Acme. I was a bag boy.
Okay.
And then I left Acme, and because a buddy of mine worked at IHOP.
All right.
And he was making great money as a server, talked me into it. And I don't know if you know this, but when you work around pancakes for 10 hours in a day, you smell like pancakes. And guess what? You can't shower the pancake smell off.
Yeah. So I worked in an Italian restaurant, and our manager's office was like in the middle of the kitchen. Like there was no removing that smell of marinara. Like I think it just lived in my skin.
I quit in 2 weeks. I was like, nah. I said to my dad, I'm like, look, I'm going into my high school class, and people are like, yo, did someone eat pancakes this morning? And I'm like, I can't do this. Not to mention, you got to fucking get up at, I think I was up at like 6 a.m. No, I'm not a morning person.
Like, no.
Never been a morning person. Yeah,
no. My first job was fast food. I was at Burger King, and then I worked through some restaurants. I was a roller skating car hop at Sonic once.
Nice.
Bad idea. Roller skates, food, and beverage should not be combined ever.
What's the insurance policy of that fucking company? That's what I want to know.
Like whoever buys that as a franchise, like the amount they have to spend on insurance has got to be crazy insane. So yeah, definitely don't recommend that. So I did a lot of fast food. I actually worked for an RV dealer, which is interesting because now we live in an RV full time.
I definitely want to hit on that.
Yeah. So all the hospitality. I never did retail, but hospitality did it for me. So
it's the same thing. At the end of the day, it's the same thing. You're serving people, whether it's food or fucking video games or your cell phones or whatever the hell you're doing. It's the same thing.
It is.
So let's talk a little bit about today's day and age and where we are with something that came about from the pandemic. How do you feel about, and you could be as divisive as you like on this podcast, how do you feel about remote work versus working in an office? Because I know my owners aren't the biggest fans of they're like, like I said, they're from like the 80s.
Yep.
So working remote was like peak COVID. We were out of the office, like I'm part of sales, even though I don't do sales anymore. We were out of the office for 3 months, and that's the max. Like peak COVID, we went back to the office because they couldn't handle it.
Because they didn't have systems in place to handle it. So, all right, my thoughts.
No, I don't think anyone did though, right? I mean, I think that was something that like people we kind of have a better angle of working from home, but at the time it was like, oh fuck, like that type of thing.
Yeah, and that's an interesting dynamic again between entrepreneurs versus employees and offices, because I had an online business far before the pandemic. So like being on Zoom calls and interacting via email, like all of that was my norm already. So then when it became mandatory and there's all these new people doing it, it kind of almost just caused like a lot of angst for us that had already been doing it. We're like, come on, it's Zoom. Just log into Zoom. Like, just log in and unmute yourself.
Yeah. Plug in this code. That's how you get there. And
so I think that, like, obviously remote work was here prior to the pandemic. Obviously it was not as many people doing the remote work thing, but I think what it showed a lot of people is that you business owners of like bigger corporations, you don't have to have offices to be able to get shit done.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of them that aren't ready to accept that, and they're like, no, work at a corporate place is in an office and between these four walls, and you take a lunch break, and we have 47 meetings every single week. And like, they're just so in that mindset that they're like, remote work is never going to change. Like, it's never going to work for us. And I think what COVID did was showed that it absolutely can, as long as you have the right systems and structures in place to make it efficient. And I actually think people are more productive being able to kind of like control their own schedule and work from home versus being in the office. What you said earlier, right? You're like, I mean, I got 8 hours and I get paid the same amount of money. So do I need to be faster? Probably not. Like, there's just a different mentality that if you can work from home and get it done in 4, why go into the office and work 8?
And, you know, I'll tell you, during COVID, during those 3 months when I worked from home, my stress level was like 0 because I didn't have to drive 2 hours.
Yes.
I didn't have to put on pants, really. At the end of the day, I wear basketball shorts 24/7, you know. Yep. And I'm an IT guy, so like I custom build my computers. I upgrade them every 2 years. So my computer is basically a fucking supercomputer.
Right.
And I can be way more productive at home because my computer is it's 10 times better than the work computer I have. If I have like 3 Excel spreadsheets open, my little tiny work computer is like, like it sounds like it's a fucking ticking time bomb, you know?
Yes.
And it's not a terrible work computer.
Right,
it's just they built them small so that if we had to work from home, we could just unplug it and take it with us. But from a computer nerd perspective, that doesn't give it a whole lot of room to breathe.
Power, yeah. Yep.
So it struggles a bit.
Yeah, and I think with the remote work, I think a lot of people are seeing that. Like, people are more productive because they're less stressed. They don't have the commute. There's no, like, rush to get ready and, like, be ready and drive an hour. I think that people are way less stressed, and they're like, oh, let's just get our work done. And then things are done. But I will say there's a lot of companies still not adapting it because they're super old school and they're like, you have to be in an office. It's funny. My husband actually works remotely, or he's getting ready to work remotely for this whole RV journey. And his boss is kind of old school where he's like, I think we need to be in the office. And I'm like, nope, everything is on a computer and a phone. You don't actually have to.
Yeah, and I just was looking at a report. I follow Barstool on Twitter, and they post some funny stuff sometimes. And there was a recent study that said remote employees are actually working longer and harder than office employees.
Now I will say that is probably because of lack of systems, lack of time management, and lack of habits of the people that are not used to working in that capacity. I will say it is hard to manage yourself, right? Like, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm my boss. If I don't want to work one day, I can be like, we'll just push that till tomorrow.
Nah.
Like, yeah, we're going to skip that. So you do have to be disciplined in managing your time and managing what's on your calendar and managing yourself actually doing things. So I could see that. And I've also seen a lot of, like, just corporate companies convert to remote work really poorly, where they're like, hey, email, text, this, here's a Zoom link for this, here's 47 different spreadsheets, I also want you to use this tool. Like, that is going to be really hard to work in as an employee if you've got all these back to that stat of 12 and a half hours of missing information every week. That ties into that for sure.
And also, I will tell you, Microsoft and Outlook probably also ties into that because their search feature is the fucking
It's
worst.
awful.
So bad.
See, that's another perk of being an entrepreneur. You can just be like, I'm using Google. I'm not touching Microsoft. Like, corporate is so old school with Microsoft Office. I'm like, it's the worst.
I'm Chris.
And I'm Mel.
And together we host the podcast Spoil My Movie.
We were watching movies anyway.
And we were having in-depth conversations about those movies too.
So, we decided to share our thoughts with the world.
You can expect me to gripe about inaccurate details like supposedly cold weather, but you can't see anyone's breath.
And you can expect me to be totally adorable, but also psychologically deep.
And by the end of each episode, we'll provide our respective ratings.
Using a rating scale custom tailored to the movie in question.
Check us out wherever you get your podcasts.
We're everywhere. We're actually behind you right now.
You know, like, I don't mind. So I'm a Windows guy. I don't mind Windows.
Yep.
I don't mind Excel. I don't mind PowerPoint and Word. It's Outlook. Outlook is probably the worst office email you could probably have, honestly. And it sucks because, like, you know, it is what it is. I mean, I'm not paying for it, but, like, I could tell you I'm not using that for my business emails, you know. Then again, I also use, like, I don't know. I use Bluehost, and I have a subscription with Bluehost, and I'm able to create whatever emails I want. So that's actually what I use. And it's very archaic, but I never miss an email. It's real easy to search.
There you go.
It's super archaic. Like, if you saw it, you're like, that looks like an email client from the, like, 90s, you know. But it works. It works fine.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I wanted to get your feel on that because I know sometimes, you know, people have a very kind of like, I don't know, for me, I feel like for me, I think it takes a certain mindset to work remotely, and some people are good at it, some people aren't. I think personally, I'm fucking great at it. I love it because I can actually I'm very good at multitasking. I could be cleaning my kitchen and be on a sales call and training 100 people just because I know my shit. So, like, I don't need to be sitting. It is nice, like, the camaraderie piece, which I think that's what the issue is with some of the older people, is that they feel like when you're not in the office, there's no camaraderie amongst
and I can see that, and that's a lot of entrepreneurs are lonely and join masterminds for that reason, or join networking groups for that reason, because you've got to have that to some degree. But, like, I will tell you, for me, I couldn't ever go back to working in an office and having to be there at 8 a.m. Like, not happening. Because my boss, I would be like, I have a massage on Wednesday at 2 p.m. I need to leave. And they're like, that's not how this works.
Yeah, listen, I love my owners, but ask me if they're there on a Friday at 3 p.m.
That's
most of the time they're not.
I'm just saying, as an entrepreneur, I have Fridays, every Friday blocked off. Like, no one can book unless I put them there because I kind of do the same thing.
So let's transition into this. And this is kind of a topic that I feel I fit into. What are some tips for people who might want to take the leap and transition from that 9 to 5 to being a business owner, entrepreneur? Because I could tell you, like, I have an LLC, I have a DBA, like, I have all those things in place. Yep. My problem is I'm too, and hopefully you're not offended, or, you know, I say dumb shit on here. I'm a pussy. I'm a pussy. I can't take the leap. So I'm sure there's plenty of other people like me, especially it's different when you're 21 to when you're 37. I have a beautiful fiance. I have 2 beautiful little baby dogs. Yep. You know, no kids, right? But I have people that depend on me and dogs that depend on me. And yeah, go ahead. Sorry. Yeah.
Well, what kind of dogs do you have, first off? Because I'm a dog person too.
So most of the time people don't know, but they're called Brussels Griffins.
Oh, no, I've never heard of that.
Google it. They look like Chewie from Star Wars, Chewbacca.
Yeah.
Or they look like Ewoks from Star Wars.
All right.
It depends on the day and how much hair they have.
Yeah. We have 2 mini golden doodles, so they're just
nice,
fluffy little cotton balls.
Yeah. Mine are the same way, pretty much.
Yeah. So, okay. first off, I will say, obviously I told you my story earlier. I got fired, and that's kind of what pushed me into entrepreneurship, and it was freaking terrifying. And I also had the support of my husband to, like, pay the bills and things. So I will say it is very tough. It's a very hard shift from employee mindset to entrepreneur mindset. Like, it is just, it's an entirely different ball game. I will tell you, it's not for the faint of heart. You have to make a lot of really hard decisions. You're the end all be all. Like, you are making the decisions, and if they're right or wrong, you succeed or fail. So it's not for everyone. Like, it's just not. But I would say, if you're serious about it and you actually have this, like, desire to do it, you've got to have a plan, because without a plan, you will say yes to literally everything. Like, I talked about going back to goals earlier. If you don't have these concrete goals of, like, this is what I want and here are the steps to get here, it's going to be really easy to say yes to everything, because you're like, oh, that might work. That might work. That also might work. And that's actually what I did at the beginning of my entrepreneurship career, because I did not have that. I was like, oh, I want to do this. But there was no, like, this is what I want. And I was like, I'll take a class on funnels, and I'll take a class on this, and I'll watch 47 webinars and sign up for 1,000 different email lists. And then I got really overwhelmed and wanted to quit. So you've got to have the goals of what you're even trying to do with it, and you have to have a, like, why. Like, why entrepreneurship over a 9-to-5? And if you cannot solidly answer that, do not take the jump, because there has been so many times, even when I was making 6 figures, that I was like, fuck this, I'm out. Like, what is this? What did I sign up for? And I go back to my why, and I'm like, okay, that's why. Just gotta keep pushing through.
Fridays off is her why.
Fridays off, being able to travel in an RV for a year and live in it. My kids being able to, like, see this, because I grew up poor. So, like, they have been more places in their 10 years than I was until I was, like, 28. Like, that's my why. And when I keep going back to that, then it makes the hard shit a little bit easier. So it's not for the faint of heart, and you've got to have a plan in place, but there also has to be this level of, I'm going to jump in and figure it out. If I'm all in, I'm going to jump in and figure it out. So I know that's like the woo-woo fluffy, and I can give you, like, strategy and stuff too, but that's honestly the most important part, is you've got to have that massive why, or else you are going to give up. I promise you.
No, I mean, that makes sense. We like the fluffy foo-foo stuff. We don't have to dig down.
I like the fluffy foo-foo. I've also got the strategy of, like, don't do this, stop signing up for shit, just go get stuff done. But the bigger part of it, if you don't have that backing, like, you'll want to quit so many times.
Yeah, I think for me, it's all right. You have this stable salary, right?
Oh,
and
yeah.
then
and then you have entrepreneurship that looks like this. It's like a roller coaster.
It's the wacky waving inflatable flailing tube guy. You're like,
yep.
Yeah, I got some money, now it's gone. Yeah, I got some money, now it's gone.
Yep.
That's kind of, I think for me, if I was 21, 22 again, it would be very easy. I wouldn't have, I would be doing what I'm doing, except I'd be doing it for myself. But I think having bills to pay and having health insurance that's paid for tends to throw that. So if you're listening to this and, depending on where you are in life, it's always a risk.
Yeah, absolutely.
Being an entrepreneur, and you may not succeed, you may fail, but you it's almost like crypto. You never want to invest what you can't afford. So, like, if you get into entrepreneurship, but you have $100,000 in credit card debt, you should probably be careful, because that's not going to go anywhere. School loan debt, everyone has at this point, and that could go to zero if need be. But some of the other shit, they could take your car, like, poof, gone. And I think as you get older, like me, that's kind of like where I think a lot of people where we are, it's like, well, I have an established life, but I do want to do this. But it's the scary part is, well, am I going to succeed? Because you can't really fail. there's no room for failure, because if you fail, then it's like,
no. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of that, again, goes back to mindset, right? Like the scarcity mindset of growing up poor. And like you finally gotten to this point that you can like comfortably pay bills and stuff, and you're scared that it's going to go all the way back to what you lived before. Like, I swear that's like ingrained in us growing up like that. Like,
I'd
like
prefer to not eat.
hurdle.
I'd prefer to not eat like easy mac and cheese
And ramen.
and like ramen, ham and cheese sandwiches every day.
Right.
I do enjoy the occasional like lobster tail and steak, and I can afford that now to a certain
right?
degree.
Like we've set up that new standard, and we've gotten to this point where like this is great. I can't go back to that. So I think there's a lot of mindset stuff that comes into it. But yeah, it's always a risk. It is always a risk. And I think you have to, again, that why has to be stronger than that risk. And you're just like, we're jumping in, let's do this.
Like, I think I like here's where I'm at. I think I could do it.
Yeah.
But I'm scared to pull the trigger because I got bills to pay, right? But
Yep.
my issue is, and I don't want this to sound pompous because I'm not like that, but I train people. That's my job. I train salespeople about products and how to sell and what to do and how to market. So I know all of those things. So for me, it's like and I help people that are very successful, people that make, $1 million a year or $100,000 a month in renewals, where they don't need to do it. Like, if they stop doing everything, they'd make $100,000 a month. And I'm helping these people, and I sit there and I'm like, I am more intelligent than you.
Yep.
Yet you're making 10 times more than me. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, it's a catch-22.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, I'm helping you. I feel like I know that I'm smarter than you, but your bank account, like I'm helping this guy the other day, and he's a good friend of mine, so he's not one of these people that I consider that. But I do know more than him in what I do with Medicare. And he's like, yeah, this is my investment account. And he's got like $300,000 in his investment account, just that he gets to, it's like, if you've ever invested, it's like basically a casino that's legal.
Right.
And that's what he's doing. And I'm looking at him, I'm like,
I would ask you, what is their background? Because I swear, I feel like it's harder for us to overcome this hurdle to be able to charge absorbent amounts of money for these things because of like growing up poor and like having the scarcity mindset all the time. And it's not true all across the board, right? Like there's people that grow up poor that now make bajillions of dollars. That's totally a thing. But I think it's just a lot easier for people that didn't have those mindset hurdles to go that route or do those things. When for me, like I know for me, when I started selling my services, like it was really hard for me to charge a lot of money. Like my coach told me, you could charge $500 an hour for your services. And I'm like, on what planet? Mars? She's like, no, like people consistently pay me $500 an hour. And I'm like, that's not real.
yeah.
I was like, my parents didn't even make $50 an hour combined when I was growing up. Like, what? So I do think there's a lot more hurdles when it comes to that, but it's scary, and you've got to have kind of like proof of concept, obviously, before you just like jump off and do that. And you've got to make smart financial decisions. But at some point, if you want it, you got to pull the trigger.
I think that's my problem, is I do have the poor mindset. And if you're listening to this podcast and you're poor, we were there. I mean, let me tell you a poor person story, and if you want to tell one that's funny, be my guest. But one time, my dad couldn't afford electricity, so the electric was about to be shut off in our whole apartment. And I got the bright idea, and we lived in a condo, and there was 4 people. It was us and 3 others. There was 2 upstairs and 1 across the hall. I got the bright idea of taking every electrical cord that we have, like extension cord, and feeding it through the hallway and plugging it into the building's open port out there. And we fed it in, and I hid the cord with the outside giant pads that they had. And we had power for probably another week because we were basically stealing it from the fucking building, but it was keeping our refrigerator on. We could charge our phones so that like that was my alarm to get up and go to school.
I feel like that's an entrepreneur mindset because you fixed a problem. Now, might not have been a legal one, but
yeah.
We'll skip those details.
The people that watched the building eventually caught on, and they would just unplug it and throw it in front of our house. Like, come on, Yeah. And we got away with it for another day or two, but eventually he was able to pay it. But at least all our food didn't go bad,
Yeah. I mean, I've got similar stories too, right? Like, I was actually the oldest of 5, so like food sometimes they're like, oh, sorry, this is all we've got, and I'm like, you have 5 kids, how are we gonna feed all of us?
That's a big family, man.
It is, and it's I moved out when I was 18. I was on my own, so like I've always had to hustle, and I feel like finally I got to this place from a business standpoint that I don't have to hustle, but it takes a lot of mindset work when you grow up that way to like kick those old habits and like thinking that everything is going to go back to that.
Well, let's this will be the last business question, and then we'll talk about the fun stuff before we end. So what are, and if you're listening to this, we don't want to offend you, but maybe if you know about it, you'll be able to kind of rectify your course. But what are some type of traits that make great entrepreneurs? And what are some traits that are red flags to you?
Yeah. Okay. Great entrepreneurs, just like you did, you created a solution from a problem, right? That's really, entrepreneurs are here to create solutions for problems. We want to fix things, but in the meantime, we also want to make a lot of money and work way less hours. Like, we want to work smarter, not harder here. So I do feel like you've got to be like problem solving and innovative and willing to put in the work, because it's going to require work regardless of what stage you are in business. At the beginning, there's hustle. As you scale, there's some hustle. Like, there's always going to be hard work that has to be put in. So I feel like if you've got those traits and you have a skill that people need, you can make a business. I think red flag, if you can't even manage day to day and like every single of your life looks the same every year, just over and over, because you're not like that goal oriented person, or you're just kind of a go with the flow person, it's going to be harder, because entrepreneurship and owning a business takes a lot of planning and a lot of goal setting so that you are able to move things forward and actually grow. Time management, honestly, the entrepreneurs I work with, that's probably their biggest problem, is that they don't manage their time well. So then they're not getting stuff done that's actually growing the business. They're just getting busy work done. And time management's a hard one because they don't teach us that stuff in school very well. So like,
no, you know algebra, which you never fucking use.
Like, nah, let's not talk about that. Yeah, that's a whole different topic for a different day, school system. But I think that you have to be hardworking and goal oriented and always want the next best thing. And if you don't have that mindset, it's going to be really difficult to have a business, because you've constantly got to kind of be thinking about what's going on. What, like, even if you don't have a team and it's just you, like, you're all the departments. You're the marketing team, you're the sales team, you're the operations, like, you're doing all of it. So, those would probably be some of the ones that I would say.
All right, I like it. I like it.
And it's not
so
to say if you have bad time
this.
management skills, you can't be an entrepreneur, because you totally can. That's just some of the things I see.
Yeah, listen, I work with some guys that have insurance agencies, and their time management is fucking awful, but they make a shit ton of money. So it's sometimes, and this is one thing for me. So especially like if you're in a business, especially like insurance, where everyone is kind of your competition, but also kind of your friend. Networking is really important. Sometimes some of these businesses, it's about not about what you do, but about who you know. And it's not just like, it's making friends with everybody, right? Not just the CEO, the CFO. It's the marketing guy, the fucking guy that's sweeping up the floors. It's you make friends with everybody, you talk to everybody, and I think that that's something that's like a lost art with some people. They don't understand, like, you don't have to necessarily talk to the guy that runs everything, but if you talk to everybody else, you could get a good feel for what they do and how they operate their business, and maybe how you can take that and implement it into what you do too, right?
Yeah, that's definitely something I feel like is lost in the online space, is just relationship building and networking. Because you think about it, social media all goes down. Like, every platform is gone. People ran businesses before we had social media. Like, you have to create relationships in some way. And I think so many people want to do it virtually and, like, with no connection and not talking to anyone. They're like, I just want you to come and pay me. I'm like, that's not really how this works. Like, you have to have the relationship. You've got to meet the people. And it is a lot of times one person you talk to knows someone else who knows someone else who knows someone else. And you never know where those connections can go.
Yeah, absolutely. So, if you're listening to this, talk to people, okay? Stop being a keyboard warrior, okay? Break out the pen and paper and talk to people. But let's get to the quick fun thing that I want to talk a little bit about. And this is a little bit about you, right? So you recently systemized your business a bit, right? So that you could start living your life in an RV. And you're homeschooling your twin girls. Yep. And like what I guess made you want to travel the country and bring your family with you, and talk a little bit about that, because that's something that I wish I could do as well. Yeah. Like, I love traveling, and I wish I could do it more. Yeah,
for sure. Yes, I have always loved traveling. Like, again, going back to this, like, growing up poor with nothing. When that was one of my main drivers, is I was like, I want to experience things and I want to do things. So if that means I have to make money to do that, that's what's going to happen. A couple things. I probably back when I was starting to help organize houses, I watched this documentary called Minimalism, and it's actually these two guys out of Ohio. Basically, the one guy's mom died, his marriage ended all in the same month, and he was forced to, like, go deal with all of those, like, physical possessions in the house. And he just realized, he's like, we're all living and working insane hours to pay for our bills and buy shit that we don't need. And then we just do it all over again, like, over and over and over. So the whole premise of this minimalism documentary is less is more. Less stuff, less debt, less, so that you're able to have more experiences and travel. And I think that really hit me, because I was like, that's all I want. I don't need fancy cars and houses. Like, I just want to travel everywhere. So we've been doing that. So I said my twins are 10. We've been doing that with them a ton, but we had started camping probably about 3 years ago. We had purchased an old RV, an old truck, like super old. And I was like, we'll just try it out, see how it works. And we loved it. So finally, stars aligned. I had already had my online business, but my husband just got offered this new job that has potential to be remote. And I was like, I think we should just jump in and do this for a year. And it was crazy at first, because I was like, no, never mind. There's no way we can actually do that. But the more I actually, like, planned it out and mapped it out, I'm like, we can totally do this. So stars all aligned back in February of 2023, and he ended up getting this job. And because I'm an entrepreneur, people don't like loaning money when you don't have, like, a W-2. So he ended up getting the truck and the camper in his name before he switched jobs. And I was like, all right, we're all in. We leave in September. Like, we have 6 months to, like, map this all out, plan this all out, rent our house, and we're just doing it. So we leave in 46
that
days
is cool, man.
Today's recording. We leave in September. But we're currently already starting to move in so that we can kind of get situated before we leave. And yeah, going to be homeschooling and kind of doing a big circle around the U.S. and see where it takes us.
So what type of camp are we talking here? Are we talking like some HGTV type of shit where they, they go in and they like,
it's
up it,
getting up
make it
there.
look pretty recent.
It's getting up there, yeah. I mean, we have a king size bed. We've got a washer and dryer. It's a big 44-foot fifth wheel, so it's not like we're...
Holy shit.
No, it's not like we're in like a tent camper. We have a master bedroom. It's actually got a second bedroom for the kids and a second bathroom. Like, I mean, it's 400 square feet. Like, it's a pretty big RV. But...
Holy shit. Yeah, that's like bigger than some New York apartments.
It is. Only it's on wheels, so then you can just go wherever you want and stay wherever you want. So, it's not like we're roughing it. Definitely not roughing it.
That is so cool. So what is some of your top destinations you guys plan on hitting?
Yeah, so we are doing Maine first. We'll be in Maine for about 2.5 to 3 weeks, and then I'm actually in a wedding, so I've got to come back for my brother's wedding, and then we're really just going to we're chasing the warm because we're from Ohio, because nobody wants to be in Ohio when it's cold.
Been there, yeah. It gets fucking cold in Ohio.
It's so cold. And it's just gray for like 9 months out of the year, and you're just like, oh my God. So we're chasing warm and sunshine. So I think we're going to go down the coast and hit up Florida, pretty much skipping all those middle states like Kansas and Arkansas. Like, there's not much there. Yeah. So we're going to do like Texas.
Let's want some good barbecue. Kansas has good barbecue.
That's true.
Texas barbecue better though.
It is. So we're gonna kind of do that loop. We're gonna hit a lot of national parks, and really we'll stay places for like 2 weeks at a time, because we're not traveling for a year. We're gonna be living in a house that moves, so it's a different mindset. So yeah, should be an adventure.
That is freaking cool, man. I've talked to a couple people about kind of doing this interview isn't out yet. It'll probably be out in a couple weeks. But I interviewed a husband and a wife, and they had their own podcast, and they went to their honeymoon in Japan, and they fucking loved it.
Yep.
And they went home, and they're just there, and then the wife is like, she made a joke, and she's like, hey, let's just fucking move to Japan. And they laughed, and then they looked at each other and like, do you want to do that? Do you want to do this?
Yep.
And they just fucking moved to Japan.
Yeah, and that's all.
They
it's that
put
crazy,
their shit in storage.
Yeah, it's that crazy idea that you're like, wait, we could actually do this if we like put steps in place. Let's do it. And it's terrifying. Like, I'm so scared. Like, there's so many variables that could go wrong in this scenario, like being across the country for a year, and so many changes that we have to make. It's scary, but it's also like, you only live once. Let's just do it. I mean, the worst that happens is we have to come back home. Like, that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a really cool life experience. I mean, that's got to be something that would be really cool for your daughters. Yeah. Your twin. Well, they're twins. Do you have two daughters?
Yeah, I have two girls, twins, Kenna and Layla. They are super, super pumped. They're excited. I think they're nervous too. I mean, obviously leaving school and homeschooling and all of that kind of stuff. It's a big adjustment, but I mean, the amount of stuff they're gonna see in a year, and again, goes back to my why. They are my why. And the reason I built this business so that I could do stuff like this. And I think the more work you put into planning that out and making it happen versus just letting your life happen to you, you're going to see so much more success for sure.
And I feel like from a life perspective, like, look, school, I couldn't imagine having kids and dealing with school now. Like, no. Everyone on their phones, kids are growing up way too fast. They have this unrealistic view of what people are supposed to look like and what people are supposed to be. And I think having an experience like that for them at that age that's going to teach them things that they would never learn in school. It'll make them appreciate shit more, and more people should fucking do it.
Right? It's going on that list with hospitality and retail.
Travel the fucking world in a big ass RV.
Yes.
Well, look, it It was a pleasure having you on. Can you tell everybody that is listening where they can find either your content or your business, or if someone wants to look you up and get your services?
Yeah, for sure. So from a business standpoint, just go to bcohq.co. So that's just our main business website. If you want to follow the RV journey, the entrepreneur in me is going to do a whole content thing. We've got a TikTok and everything for that too. It's actually the Dixon Detour. So all the handles, you can find the Dixon Detour. So it'll be humor and helpful tips and maybe disastrous things that happen while we're driving all over the country. Who knows? But you can find all of that on both my websites. So everything's on there.
That's all. So before we end, who's doing the driving? Are you both going to do the driving?
Oh, hell to the no. I can barely drive the dually by itself, let alone the dually with a camper. Nah, he's going to be driving, not I. That is not my job.
I was gonna say it, but I didn't want to. Want to be that guy, because I feel like it would be me also doing the driving of that, because I know if she drove it, she'd be like, okay, how you park it, or you go through this tunnel, we'd be pulling over way too much.
I literally can barely back up the dually into tight spaces. We are not attempting to put a 44-foot camper on that. No, thank you.
Well, look, you can find my podcast. This will be up in a little bit, couple weeks.
Perfect.
You can find my podcast at Drink O'Clock Pod on all socials. And then you can also go to my website, which I thought was clever, which is drinkoclock.beer.
Yeah.
And you can listen to all my episodes on my website. And hey, look, good luck on your journey. I mean, I feel like just the entrepreneur in me, we should do a short, another follow-up podcast 3 months in.
Okay, yeah, you
to
gotta
see where you're at. So you'll have to reach out.
You gotta give me at least 3 months. I've got to get it under my belt before I go talking about it, because yes, we should definitely do that.
Well, make sure that your hair's done, that you're not out there, with oil on your hands, changing tires and shit,
Again, not my job. No, thank you. I'm gonna go to the grocery store and pack the RV up. I'm not pulling it or changing tires.
Hey, look, you know what? That's why you're an entrepreneur, right?
Yeah.
It's his job. Well, look, you have a great night. Everybody listening, thank you so much. I appreciate the love. And everybody, you have a great night.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me.